Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Binna Burra Stakeholder Webinar number 4. Today's Wednesday, the 30th September 2020. Let me just start the meeting by paying acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of this area where Binna Burra is located and where I'm broadcasting from today. And we recognise their continuing connection to the land, the waters and the culture. And we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Our agenda today will be to just run through a couple of protocols with Zoom. Then I'll do some introductory comments, followed by updates from Jonathan Fisher, our CEO. Tim will give you an update on the Via Ferrata development. Also, Tim will contribute when Jonathan's going through his presentation in relation to the infrastructure work that's going on site. And then Tristan will be introduced to you today, and Tristan's doing a wonderful job for us on the visioning and master planning and our reconciliation action plan activities. And then we'll allow time for question and answers. I anticipate the whole exercise will take about 90 minutes, but you're welcome to stay the whole 90 minutes, and we'll go further if the question and answers require, or you can drop out whenever you wish. We've had a wonderful support from all sorts of people, staff and people connected to Binna Burra volunteering activities over the last month or so, and that's continuing. And I particularly want to thank any of those who are listening today who have done volunteer work for us, so thank you very much for your contributions. In relation to Zoom protocols today, be aware we're recording this session today. It becomes a useful record of the recovery process of Binna Burra. So if you don't wish to be recorded, you might need to stay quiet, I guess. Just be aware that if you say in the question and answers or make comments that they'll be recorded. Also, Leighton's currently got everybody on mute while I'm doing these introductory comments, and Leighton will manage the access as we go through the meeting this morning. Basically, we'll present for the first couple of sessions and then engage in the question and answer. So as we go through, just if you've got any questions, just make a note and we'll address all those at the end also. You can also use the chat box. If you've got questions or ideas, put them in the chat box, and then we'll revisit those when we get to the question and answer session. We've had some wonderful coverage of Binna Burra throughout the 12 months since the terrible events of September last year. And one of the more recent ones that was released at the 12-month reopening of Binna Burra was from a lady in Boston in the US. Her name's Meg Peer. Meg's very widely acknowledged around the world as you know, a highly regarded commentator in the cultural tourism space. And she interviewed 11 people, some of whom are on our Zoom today, about their connection to Binna Burra. So I thought she did a wonderful job with it. But if you haven't seen it and you've got access to the internet, which obviously you have, there's the website there, thebestculturaldestinations.com, and you put in Binna Burra, and that was I thought was a very very kind and comment about the spirit of Binna Burra and how people come together to keep it going over 90 or almost 90 years, and how we'll keep it going for the next 90 years also. So we've now addressed our first mission. Our first mission after the bushfire was to get into recovery mode and get the place reopened. It's taken us 12 months to do that, and largely because of the single road access was the biggest challenge. But there are many other challenges in terms of resources, both human and financial, and lots of complex planning issues. And all those things coming together, we've managed after basically 1 year have the road reopened and the trading recommencing at the lodge. There's been challenges all the way through, and there will continue to be challenges, as there has been throughout the history of Binna Burra. I get some comfort in looking at the character of the people who established Binna Burra back in the 1930s, what they came through from the First World War, from the Spanish flu, from the Depression, and then some of them went back, like Romeo LA went back to the Second World War, but they had an enormous resilience to turmoil going on around them, and if we can be just a little bit like them, we'll be able to get through this yet another challenging period. Not just for Binna Burra, in fact, but for our national and international situation with COVID, of course, now also. But we can put a tick in the box. We've accomplished the result to reopen Binna Burra 1 year after a bushfire closed us down. And that's a historic second opening of Binna Burra in its 87-year life, the first one, of course, being back in 1933. The coverage we got in the media after the bushfire was extensive. We had probably had brand recognition for Binna Burra Lodge that we've never seen before, but we didn't have a product to sell. Now that we're back in business, the media has been kind to us, and we manage that reasonably well, I think. And we've also been able to keep our brand recognition out there. There's always plenty more to do, but the fact that we reopened got the attention of the media, and that's helped us a real lot in bringing business back into the assets which we've been able to reopen. And we'll walk through those assets today in the presentation. Our process after the bushfire, well, before the bushfire, the organisation was reasonably well prepared for a major event. None of us, I would have thought the scale of it was going to be as big as it was. And certainly that was, as it turned out, for the whole of 6 months of the Australian bushfire season was quite unprecedented. But we put response plans in place immediately on the day of the fire. And then we've had this 12 months of recovery processes. And as we do our planning now, looking forward, we need to, in terms of our risk management, building in prevention and mitigation processes throughout the organisation, and particularly with our new built infrastructure as we move forward also. So we had very good cooperation from all levels of government, coordinated through a Queensland Government Binna Burra Recovery Task Force. And then we had our own internal reconstruction council of a couple of dozen people. And that process worked for the first 6 months. And then subsequent to that, we've moved into these stakeholder webinars and forums as one of a series of tools to communicate with our various stakeholders, both internal shareholders and others who are passionate or interested about Binna Burra. And I constantly look at the best practice and standards for these sorts of disaster recovery processes and the way we manage COVID. And when I look at the national and the state guidelines, it's comforting to know that what we've done is consistent with the guidelines that come from Australia and Queensland's quite substantial experience in dealing with disasters. And in our case, we have a good understanding of our context, about the culture of the organisation and the location. We understand the complexity of the people who are passionate about Binna Burra and all the complex planning issues we have to deal with at 3 levels of government. We have engaged with our Binna Burra community in the recovery process and in our communication processes, and hopefully our coordination by keeping people inside the tent and not having, and honestly, in the last year or so, there's been nobody on the outside of the tent that's been throwing arrows at us that's had any concern to us, quite frankly, which means we've been able to be cohesive and collective in bringing giving them opportunities where they needed to, but also at the same time showing the leadership that's required in a situation like this to get the wheels back on the train and on the right track. What we're going through now in our communication processes, the Zoom is an example of it, but also building up the capacity of the organisation. And that's a critical part now with our reopening, which I'll mention very shortly. In terms of our governance activities, before the fire we had about 65 staff, and then after the fire we make about 90% of the team redundant, sadly. In the recovery process, 3 of our board members took on executive roles, and that was paid from money from the insurance payout or various recovery funding contracts. And 2 months after the fire, thankfully, Robert McDowell, who was immediate past chairman, kindly agreed to come back in as company secretary to assist us. And then the chairman before Robert was Hal Morris, and Hal very kindly came back in on the board 7 months after the fire. Actually, I should have put in there 1 month, a week or so after the fire, previous board member Tim Medhurst came back onto the board also. I mentioned Tim further down. And then 9 months after the fire, we've had Jonathan Fisher come in as our CEO. What we've done now, as of tomorrow, we'll move back to a full non-executive board. So after the fire, Ian, or just before the fire, actually, Ian Pritchard, as a board member, had come in as the interim managing director. And Ian continued that role through to the 30th of May. At that time, Jonathan came in as our new CEO, and Ian has remained as a board member. Tim, as I mentioned, came into the board a very short time after the fire at our invitation to help us with the reconstruction and recovery processes, and has been a board member up until the 9th of September this year. And Tim continues as a senior consultant for the organisation. And myself, I took on a role as executive chair after the fire, and the board has asked me to keep that going until today, which was always the plan. And then as of tomorrow, I'll stand back and be a regular chairman rather than a full-time executive type chair role. And now that we've got a CEO and a management team in place. And that's been an appropriate path for us over the last 12 months to get through what we've had to get through. And it's interesting to look at the commentary about our process over the last year or so. And I'm getting asked to present at various conferences and so forth about what happened and how we structured the recovery. So I think as an organisation, we can be reasonably, and nothing's perfect, but we can be reasonably happy that what we've done has been appropriate for our circumstances and an organisation of our scale. I'm going to hand across now to Jonathan and just walk through the slides. Jonathan, I'll just click on each slide, shall I, and just give commentary, and then where Tim might be able to or can add some extra information that would be useful in this section also. So I'll hand across to Jonathan now.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Steve. Everybody, good morning. You've seen this slide before, so I will concentrate on some of the changes that have happened up to the present day. First of all, just to acknowledge we did get open on the 1st of September, which was a major achievement for the Sky Lodges. Major achievement because if you remember rightly, there was another COVID scare just a week, 10 days before that, which meant that the intended ceremony to mark the opening of the road never happened for political reasons, for COVID reasons. But yet we still managed to get open, and it's a great credit to McElwain Contractors, to TMR, and to the staff that have managed the process of getting people back onto site. And I would say that it's been mostly successful. Certainly, there's been a respectful appreciation by the public that they can get up here, and there's been a lot of understanding about some delays. The delays haven't been as significant as we both much feared. There were a couple of mornings where we had full closures of the road still whilst they did the final bit of asphalt bitumen, if you like. And now we have the best road we've ever had. Indeed, I think it is important now that we talk about the journey to Binna Burra again. We talk about it as one of the world's great drives to one of the world's great views. I know over the 80-odd years, the journey to Binna Burra from Brisbane has much been talked about with the old bus, and then getting to within almost touching distance, and then having to walk up the track. That was part of the story, and I think it's time we update that story now and talk about the world's great drive and the world's great destination when we get here, because it really is quite special, that last few kilometers with the beautiful views that have now been reopened again, and the quality of the road is never been better. We haven't been without a few teething problems. The sky lodges have mostly opened, but not all opened. There is still there's still one apartment that we're waiting for some fire certification to be signed off upon. And Tim and Jono are working hard to make sure that the necessary checks and certificates are produced for that. The housekeeping team and maintenance team have done a simply magnificent job getting most of the furniture and fittings all up and going. As I say, there have been some teething problems. We found that the bars and other bits and pieces that were signed off as fit and ready to go over the months, the hidden seals in the units have perished, shrunk, whatever, through lack of use, through the fire, and we're still waiting for those to be replaced. So you can imagine there's been a bit of frustration where people have been coming in to stay in these wonderful apartments but not being able to use the baths, but they've been mostly very patient, and we look forward to those parts arriving and that to be finished. So we're a bit of a victim of this dockers strike that's been on the news recently. We understand that the parts are sitting in a boat off Melbourne at the moment. We're waiting for them to come up so that we can reintroduce the spa bars, and then the sky lodges will be, back to their magnificent best, I hope. Binna Burra kitchen down at the old school, we did open that, and it was opened up to the end of August, but as part of the negotiations with TMR, we were very pleased to be able to act as the honest broker, if you like, to ensure that some improvements to the access to the old school and the car parking was part of the Binna Burra road works. And so we closed from the beginning of September there and remain closed at the moment whilst they improved the entrance and car parking there for the benefit of the community as a whole. And we will plan to reopen the Binna Burra kitchen at the old school at Beachmont in about 2-3 weeks' time, the 16th of October. And we're going into partnership there with another local company to add another dimension, a bit more of a gift and coffee and cake type of experience, particularly for the day visitors that are either not necessarily wanting to go and stop up at Flying being surrounded by motorbikes, or find that they're not necessarily in the long distance walking crowd, and are simply coming up for a lovely coffee and cake and a view. And the old school at Beachmont will work perfectly for that now that we've got better parking. And long term, it is still very important that we build on the connection between Beachmont Village and Binna Burra. That's our front and back door, if you like. And I'm very aware, since we reopened, that the issues that we had before with parking up here and the demand for people coming up early to walk does cause a few issues with those people that get up a bit later and are looking simply to come up for a view and a cup of coffee. So we do need to use the old school as a potential park and ride to manage the demand from those people that have chosen to come up to Beachmont Mountain and on up to Binna Burra. So in 2 to 3 weeks' time, that will be reopened and the facilities will be much better. The campsite, the safari tents have opened, as you can see. The campers have been loving it, and certainly the comments about the safari tents again have been very positive. It's again a great credit to all the staff that were involved hands-on in getting those ready, and of course all the volunteers in the last few weeks, and there were many of them. Some of you are listening today that helped unpack new beds, put them all together, do the final painting and staining and clearing up, and I can't thank you enough for all your voluntary help alongside the hard-working staff. We're getting great feedback from the people staying in those safari tents, and it's quite amusing when I hear stories from people who say, in the old days they used to say, we'd love to come back, but can we have a tent that's slightly less mouldy than the one that we had last time? We don't have that problem now, and I hope we never have that problem. We've got really first-class facilities. I went over with Tim to see the opening of the new safari tents, the glamping, at O'Reilly's just a few weeks ago, and I was slightly nervous that they would have a a better product, and we wouldn't be able to compete. I have to say we're up there with the best of them. Our safari tents are lovely. They have character. Our amenities are very good now. Those that we have. I'm very conscious that we could do with more showers and toilets to cope with demand when we're full, and that's part of the infrastructure plans that we've applied for funding for and are still applying for funding for. But certainly the camping experience and the safari tent experience is very well received. We also started the new activities program with Lisa Groom and Park Tours. So we have a groom back working on site again, which is fantastic. And I think that's probably the highlight of the last 2 weeks, is to see the kids back enjoying rewilding, I think the term is, up here at Binna Burra. We've had a Boonah State High School come up with 40 of their kids playing cricket on the grass just to the left of the barn, and that was lovely to see them just having fun. We've had the lamping tours happening at night, so lots of excited kids getting away from mum and dad and going through the woods with their torches and spotting tawny frogmouths and all sorts of things. It really has brought the spirit of Binna Burra back. Groom's Cottage has opened, for those of you that have seen it, now named by our chairman the Bushwalkers Bar, and very appropriately. That's a hit. It really is now the melting pot where people from all backgrounds, whether they're staying for the first time in their first tent that they bought from BCF and don't know how to put it up, to those people that are staying in 5-star accommodation at the sky lodges. They're coming together around that fire, they're sharing stories, and the phrase that I seem to be adopting, you arrive at Binna Burra as a stranger but you leave as a friend, is really working quite well. There's that spirit of Binna Burra, that meeting place that has been at the center of this lovely destination, has worked well. Okay, I'm being moved on.
Sorry.
There we go. A little bit about COVID, about the standards that we've had to obviously improve to meet the COVID standards. Goes without saying that has put a bit of extra work on our team, but they're coping extremely well in the circumstances. Next screen, if we can. Can we move it on? I've spoken a bit about the sky lodges, about most of them back. Just the top apartment on the left is still yet to come back, but it's not far off. Those of you that come down will see that we're close to finishing off a little shed down there. There's a little bit of work to be done to separate the sky lodges from Tony Groom's land, to make sure that we respect Tony's land. Otherwise, it's too tempting to go down there and use it for a picnic, which we're trying to make sure that we're respectful of our neighbour. Let's move on. The tea house. The tea house project was due to finish on the 31st of August. It ran on a couple of weeks, which has meant that our work to the tea house kitchen behind the scenes is running about 3 or 4 weeks behind the scenes. However, we have got a retail and reception area there. We have a covered seating area there. We're getting lots of compliments about the look and feel about the place. A great credit to the architects there, and also a shout out to the revenue manager Scott and the reception team that have done a great job in setting that place up on a shoestring. And I look forward to the cafe and bar joining it. The safari tents I've talked about a little bit already, going down very well. The Tesla charging, if you can get your electric car to the Tesla space, you're doing well. We've got a little bit of work to do to make sure that those Tesla spaces, those electric charging spaces, stay available. But we have had some people using those charging spaces, and that's definitely a step in the right direction for our work, protecting the environment and caring for the environment, to have more of that sort of facility. We do have our own zero emission buggies that have arrived now on site, which means that the housekeeping team can move around easier and get to the different corners of Binna Burra, but it also means that we can take people around the site, pick people up from the sky lodges. Hopefully they can come up and enjoy a beer or a glass of wine up at the Groom's Cottage, and be taken back at a request, so we can improve the service and make sure that we're a little bit more accessible using electric vehicles. And there's a shot of a couple of old blokes in the bar, giving you an idea of how that is set up. And again, credit to our chairman, the man with all the pictures, has created a lovely atmosphere there, along with obviously the success of the Bushfire Gallery, which may come up in another screen in a minute. But the plans to draw, before we go on to activities, the plans to draw up the staircase and get up to the library and reading room above are well in hand. So those of you who are wondering, that is still planned to go ahead, but it'll be over the next month or two. Yes, going on to the next slide. I've already mentioned the Binna Burra activities are back, so I think we can move on from there. Next slide, Leighton. Bushfire Gallery, tremendous success. Steve, do you want to say a few words about the Bushfire Gallery?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, the gallery opened officially on the 8th of September, which was the 1-year anniversary of the bushfire. And the Mayor of Scenic Rim Regional Council did the official opening. Also attending were many of the councillors and senior officers of the council, and then they subsequently had a council meeting at Gracely Park in Beachbody, which is probably the first time in the history of Scenic Rim Regional Council the full council's come over side. So that's good for the community. Uncle Ted was, as part of the healing and smoking ceremony, participated also, which was great. I think the day was a very respectful day for those who have mixed emotions about the impact of the fire, both local and visitors, as well as our shareholders. And it opens now 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And because of COVID management issues, we need to have somebody manning the desk every day. So I've got a slide at the end of this presentation. If anybody's in the local area, we might be able to contribute a day every now and then as a volunteer from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. We still need to have people come and support us. But last Saturday was the annual general meeting of the Beachbody Rural Fire Brigade, which I attended. I took along the donation hat that we have in the barn for the rural bushfires. And after about 3 weeks, we collected $645 in donations to our local rural fire. So that was great. Great and very much appreciated by our local rural fire volunteers also. So we'll continue to do that, and it's a means to support our local volunteer firefighters, because we're back in the fire season now. We're in fire season right through until January. And although we've been fine in Binna Burra side, we're still in a bushfire risk zone, and there's already been fires over at Springbrook side and hazard reduction burns down the range a bit also. So we ever vigilant about bushfires and supporting our local volunteers. Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, next slide. Where have we got to? Okay, this is now over to Tim.
Now, Leighton might adjust so Tim can run it from his end. Let's get the technology going.
Tim will have to open the slide on his side. You'll have to stop sharing, Steve.
Okay, stop there. Yep. Okay.
Is that working now for people?
Yep.
Okay, but you can see the screen there.
Yep.
It's an image we've all seen before of where the fire was. I'm sure most people know the story that, you know, for a year, nearly 2 years ago, we applied and went through the long process of getting the funding to build the new activity called the Via Ferrata. On the 6th of September, we received acknowledgement that we'd been approved for the funding, and that was the afternoon the lodges were evacuated, and 2 days later, main lodge burnt down. It was only a week or so later that we realised that this right-hand side of the eastern side of the lodge had also, the lodge land had also burnt out, which included all that area that we're planning to build the Via Ferrata. So on the 18th of September, when Kate Jones formally announced our funding, I was actually up there that morning, found that we'd had lost that land, quickly drove down to be able to talk to the relevant authorities, and Neil O'Brien, who's been very helpful from the Department of Tourism for us, organised through Kate another $195,000 just to help us. And effectively that money is what's rebuilt the tea house and reception area at the moment. But with the Via Ferrata funding, as you know, there's thousands of them across Europe. We're looking at being the first in Australia. and essentially we've had a 1-year hiatus. As a quick reminder for those who haven't seen or been aware of what via ferrata is, essentially Italian for the iron way. We put metal rungs, metal ladders into the rock face, which allow people to go to places that normally only experienced rock climbers can go and get all the fantastic views and exposure. But the difference is that all our people, when they go on them, will be on a harness with a helmet, with 2 leads that clip them to a safety line. So if you've been on either the Sydney Harbour Bridge climb or the Story Bridge climb, it's a version of that, except you're on a rock face instead of on a bridge. We'll get to some pretty spectacular places with some pretty spectacular views. We'll have a range of activities, including something like a Burma bridge. There'll be some ladders, there'll be some other bridges right across our cliff face. We've actually got some air bubbles, lava bubbles on our cliff face. We'll have something looking like the one on the right. What I'd love to have is this sky bridge. There's only one of these in Austria, and we're looking for a version of that to fit onto the cliff. But our process has been, this was the image that we put to the government when we first applied based on all our initial investigations of where the rock was. One thing you'll notice is that this was before the fire, so it's very green. But effectively the idea was to start up in the maintenance shed, convert that into a sort of a kiosk training room, get your gear on, walk down the track, down the Bellbird clearing out to the 90-metre and the Bellbird lookout, work our way down across the cliff, across the Burma Bridge, across Bellbird Falls, and then either back up or the long route right around, quite exposed, back up to the shed. That's the original design, but of course with all these things, they're all subject to, and I'll come back to that. But in the funding, we were able to get funding for paving down to the maintenance shed, another 30 car parks, and the activities to build the ropes course. Sorry, the via ferrata. I think I may have mentioned one of the great advantages of an outcome of the task force process was that the approvals, which may have been an issue for us, of being approved by the council as a like-for-like activity. So they're essentially saying, because we've lost our ropes course, we're replacing it with another activity, just happens to be called via ferrata. Because we've lost our maintenance shed and the shed that was on the ropes course, we're replacing that with a new via ferrata building. So that has certainly helped with the planning. But one of the conditions I mentioned, or there's 2 main conditions for us and for the government, was that we needed a fauna and flora survey and also a geotech survey. The fauna and flora survey showed there's a few spaces with some endangered species that we'll keep away from. But the bigger impact on our design has been the geotech survey. And this is sort of a summary of a 64-page document that shows us these 3 areas in red that effectively they're saying we should avoid and shouldn't be building on. And so from the original plan of essentially going from left to right across the screen, there's a couple of areas we really can't use. That has obviously changed the design, but I think we're going to end up with possibly an even better outcome. Without going into the detail, we're effectively going to end up with probably 3 versions of a via ferrata. So it'll be a bit like a ski run where there's, a green run, a blue run and a black run. If I start at the black run end, this blue dotted line coming up here is a route that we're pretty excited about because it is very exposed here, but it is also roughly the original climbing route called Al Sharinga, which John Groom pioneered back in the 60s and the 70s, along with Innes Larkin's dad. And so we're looking at having that as a route, and we're looking at calling that Al Sharinga again. We're looking at, instead of having the main building over here at maintenance shed, because the main area will now be down here at Bellbird Clearing, we're looking at putting the main via ferrata building in Bellbird Clearing with the deck off it, a number of walking tracks. From the 90-metre abseil, there'll be a route that goes down, the little pinks of Burma bridges. This is really just giving you a very rough idea. So effectively we'll have a route that'll go along the bottom to the waterfall and up. There'll be an upper route that goes across the top and has some quite big exposed Burma bridges with beautiful views down the valley, as you'll see. We'll have a smaller Burma bridge across the top of the waterfall, and that'll link up to that lovely walk that goes back up through the creek in Bellbird Creek up into the clearing. In the time we might be able to bring in the fireflies at night time, add that into the activities. But it's been very clear that we're now limited to these areas, but it also means we've moved and been flexible with what I think might end up being a better outcome for us. Just as a reminder from one of Steve's slides, the old Chiringa with Don and others. And if you've walked along the lower Bellberg track, the A at the bottom, where the old days climbers had put their mark down the bottom to show where to start, is still there. And that's effectively the route that will end up going up on that one. If you can follow my sketch here, from Windy Corner where the rubbish bins were, we're now looking to be able to try and pave all the way down to Bellberg Clearing. And we're managing that because from a funding point of view, because the funding we had for 30 car parks, with our relationships and support from TMR, we've effectively got 40 new car parks now up in the saddle, campground and beside the barn, including those who've been there. There's 2 new disabled car parks and 2 for the Tesla parking. So that's freed up some funding for us to pave down to here. We're also looking at trying to get some power from the power pole on Windy Corner. So it's a fairly direct route to get down to Bellberg Clearing, and that'll set us up. So I know Jonathan's got lots of plans for the Bellberg Clearing area that overlap. We'll build on what we've already got in the master plan. But number one is getting power down there and be able to build a building out here off Bellberg Clearing. Now we're looking at a viewing platform that'll look spectacularly back down to Egg Rock and across to Shipstern. Those who know the route will know this, the cliff track route that's already there, back up Bellberg Creek, up to the waterfall, sorry, up to the Bellberg Lookout. You'll get a sense of the routes as we build them along. Whilst we had the tree clearers on site, getting rid of the some of the dead trees and trimming the dangerous ones up at the main lodge site, they've also cleared some of the trees down the road for us where the access track will be, and also cleared out to where we're looking at building the Via Ferrata building on this area here, and the location of where we're looking to have the viewing platform out the end. Once we get there, you can look down and see that in fact a lot of this area we want to build the Via Ferrata on, it was all green, a couple of years ago, is now very dead trees. And so part of our support of Neil and others in QRA, we were able to get extra funding QRA for the cliff clearing, and that also allowed us, they also added in there the funding to support the demolition work on the old lodge site and also the master planning process. But we're up to effectively with Via Ferrata. Oh, sorry, there's another image from a different angle. So this is on the north, that's the waterfall as it is at the moment, looking from the north side, looking south. That's where we'll now have the viewing platform, the 90-metre abseil, gives you an idea of some of the routes. We'll have Burma bridges across here. We'll have a public one back up in here. But as I move along, I'll be able to give more details over the coming months. Because effectively we've had a year hiatus in the Via Ferrata project with the fire, the road access, getting the lodge up and going again. So we can now focus back on there. These are my very, very first draft images. Leighton's given us some ideas of what we might do as the logo for the Via Ferrata, but a bit like that original one I showed in Europe. We'll end up with a Burma bridge across here, somebody there looking down our spectacular view from Binna Burra. To give you an idea of the task ahead, this is effectively where the lookout will be from here. But these are the trees we need to clear to make the cliff safe. National parks are very supportive of this because effectively the lower Bellberg track is below, and so clearing all this now makes the track safer into the future. But almost a year to the date of the announcement of the Via Ferrata funding, we now have the Ricks boys. So this is the same sort of company who were doing all the clearing between the existing Binna Burra Lodge and the road, over the last year, where they've been clearing all those trees and rocks, and I'm sure you've all seen the images. And we've now got the same crew getting in and doing the clearing of our cliff face for us here to give us a clear and a safe site to build the Via Ferrata on and then operate on. But just the other day when Jonathan and I are up there, you look out at the view and it's just spectacular where they'll be on the cliff looking out to Shipstone over there. That's the boys on the cliff again, some of the clearing works they're doing. But effectively, we'll end up with our own view like that. And we'll be very proud. And hopefully by around June next year, will be complete and open and operating Australia's first Via Ferrata.
Fantastic, Tim. Brilliant.
I'll stop share.
Yep, that's great, Tim. We'll leave any questions for later. We'll move on now with Tristan. Leighton, can you help us get whatever we need to do with Tristan? Tristan has been appointed by Binna Burra to guide our reconciliation action plan process as well as our master planning process, and has been doing some wonderful stuff for us. And so today we're going to present, and Tristan will do it. This is the first public sort of presentation or introduction to this work. And so it would be good to get some feedback from participants on the forum today after Tristan has spoken also. Tristan, are you okay to continue now?
Yes, I am. Can everybody see a big green screen?
Yep.
Now, we've got, actually, we're seeing what you're seeing, a split screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it looks like we might be seeing your other monitor, Tristan.
Okay. Let me revert to what I know, which is PDFs.
Yep.
Okay.
And sorry, Tristan, before you go on, and Leighton, can you just monitor if anybody else is trying to join the meeting?
Yep, I've been.
Okay, thank you. Tristan.
Okay, can you see this green screen?
Yep.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chair, Steve. Thanks, Tim and Jonathan and Leighton for keeping everything in order. So I'm just going to go through quickly a summary of the summary report here. So this is a Binna Burra Lodge Strategic Vision, Master Plan and RAP background summary report. So it's the kind of document that's necessary to happen in order to then create a master plan. So, you know, it's the kind of document that helps all stakeholders, shareholders, everybody come together, community, and have a one-stop shop for those kinds of discussions to happen. And I've been accumulating and building on this document over the last couple of months as different people send me through different bits and bobs. Relative Creative, we're here at Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast, and we're a strategic design consultancy, and really happy to be working with Binna Burra Lodge on this piece of work. So let me skip forward a sec so you know, this is the full document, at least at the moment, at least 62 odd pages of stuff going on in there, but I just want to give you a sense of the kind of the density of it. I won't be going through all of that today at all. I've got about 10 odd pages to have a quick look at today. The contents of the full document is a little bit like this. It talks about a summary, and then a space for strategic visions, wraps up what the project is and the overall scope, and then goes in to speak about Binna Burra histories, and then the Bushfire, and Binna Burra today, and then Binna Burra futures. And then we start to move into what that can start to mean for master planning, what kind of design principles can start to coalesce, what issues and constraints might come together, and then any preliminary master planning that has happened, including the space to continually reflect on the 2008 master plan as the springboard for anything else that happens. Okay, so I just wanted to sort of go through some of the pages now, and that will give you a sense of some of the work that we've been doing. And I'll just check that the chat's all right. Everyone else seems to be fine, so that's great, Leighton, that you can keep looking into Ian's screen. So for example, the key recommendations of this report are that we continually build on it. I think we're on about draft 8 sort of thing at the moment, and every week or so I provide an update to Jonathan and Tim and Steve in particular with an updated report. Pretty soon, you know, really now we're in that stage B of that background summary report starting to be shared and socialized among stakeholders for the purpose of providing context for those stakeholders to engage in the master plan and RAP consultations. And then, you know, pretty soon after that, we can call it a final background summary report. And it can be the artifact that has subsequent consultation added to it as appendix items, so that we can move into D and do the master planning, the reconciliation action process that I'll talk about in a minute, and other documents that will track their progress by keeping in line with this document. So just to give you a sense of the phases on this report, really this starts in 2008 when the original master plan was done. So that's the first blue rectangle there on the bottom left. The second one is where we're at now. This report is otherwise known as that strategic future vision setting stage, where we are at the moment now synthesizing into this external background summary report. Really at the same time as well, which I'll go through in a little bit more, we are moving into phase 2 where we're drafting a reconciliation action plan. We'll get to phase 3 then, which is basically a reimagined master plan, springboarding from that 2008 master plan. And then of all kinds, phase 4, all kinds of design delivery will have to happen from there in the future. So you can see some of the key phase dates, such as today, where we are socializing this report in this webinar. Wairaka, on the 30th of October, Wairaka is the First Nations group, that Yugambeh group that we're engaging with to talk to about the RAP process, and we'll continue to engage with them. Friends of Binna Burra weekend is coming up, and then we've got a big week with the culminating in the AGM on the 22nd of November. So this report will be important to seek endorsement from shareholders, particularly by that point. But we're hoping that by early December, the reconciliation action plan, as a result of really springboarding from this report, is finished. So strategic visions, certainly the strategic vision is this idea that we're halfway through a small journey in time, with the 2019 bushfire providing an opportunity to reset, reimagine and recreate, ready for another 86 years. And you can see some other things that we've captured along the way there. So we encourage you all to think about the way that you would describe the strategic visions as well, as much as thinking about how you would describe Binna Burra's principles. So this is a preliminary infographic that really tries to wrap up all of the different layers of principles in a principles framework. So right in the middle of that infographic is the Binna Burra logo, and then circled by ecotourism, which fosters environmental and cultural understandings and appreciation and conservation. So if not anything else, Binna Burra exists as an ecotourism destination. But it's not just ecotourism. Ecotourism means many things to many people and has many octopus arms. And so the next yellow part makes mention of things like wellness tourism, regenerative tourism, solidarity tourism, special events tourism, business events, special interest, educational, and wildlife tourism. Then the next circle out, the really light green, is to say, well, none of that exists without these key pillars that Binna Burra is signatory to, such as signatory of the United Nations Global Impact, a commitment to the 10 principles and the Sustainable Development Goals, such as a commitment, not a signatory, but certainly an informal commitment. There is no mechanism to sign up to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the International Charter of Walking, and of course, operating on UNESCO World Heritage listed area, that is Leamington National Park, and importantly, 20 consecutive years of maintaining ecotourism certification. And then we go to the next circle out, the greens and the blues, which is, I guess, about business models. Binna Burra sits in a spectrum of business models between profit-making motives and mission motives, and at any given time may point to those different motives in respectful and responsible ways. And the bigger circle, the kind of the typical three pillars of business triangle: environment, economic and social are there. But then the biggest circle right on the outside is always remembering, and it's really clear to me listening to Steve and Tim and Jonathan, for example, that the interest in maintaining that global view and that understanding of little old Binna Burra's contribution to climate change, to all kinds of social transformations that may occur because of climate change and other things, and other geopolitical shifts that may arrive on Binna Burra's door. Such as big megatrends. So this is a page that explains at least some of those megatrends coming from CSIRO Futures megatrends. That's just that yellow circle again, the tourism futures, for us to continually think, what does this mean for Binna Burra? How can we create visitor experiences out of these lenses of tourism? And then the other part of the document is to continually track and gather where we are at with the Reconciliation Action Plan. So you probably also saw a media release on September 22 that Steve sent out declaring Binna Burra starting on that journey of reconciliation, of the Reconciliation Action Plan. And we have started to build a kind of a vision for reconciliation there on the right-hand side. And I might just read that out for those that can't sort of read it too well. As the current generation of stewards of the Binna Burra cultural landscape, we acknowledge the contribution of Leamington National Park to the wider pattern and evolution of Queensland's history and heritage, which extends for tens of thousands of years before colonial settlement of this area. We recognise the world as a different place than it was when Binna Burra was founded in 1933. We recognise the histories, stories and living knowledge of Aboriginal people and culture of the Binna Burra surrounds should be a key component to the Binna Burra narrative. Binna Burra is committed to listening and understanding, for example, what activity and movement was in the surrounds before settlement, what occurred in the preceding years of settlement, what impact of tree clearing had, how Indigenous people were involved in that industry and others, how stories of links with clans on the coastline should be told, and what Indigenous knowledge of ecologies, climate, and other patterns of the surrounds is important. The next century for Binna Burra in this new chapter post bushfires should reflect action that speaks to these threads and what Binna Burra has been and could be to all Australians and visitors to this place. So just a snapshot of the RAP process. We have started a reconciliation working group, which is one of the first things you do in a reconciliation action plan. So these plans are endorsed by an organisation, national organisation called Reconciliation Australia, and they have 4 levels of plans that you can get going on a journey on. Binna Burra started on the Reflect RAP, which is the first RAP, the first tier. And it's usually the place to start when you do your first RAP. A RAP then this RAP will get written and endorsed over the next few months and then implemented over the next 2 years. And then within 2 years, we'll be well on our way to the next level of RAP. So it's an ongoing process. So we've started that RAP working group meeting. We've been having virtual meetings and face-to-face meetings. We've been having them with the Wairaka organisation, a partnership that we've built with them, where in particular, Craig Williams and Clinton Brewer, Yugambeh, local First Nations people are central to that process. We're also lucky to have Lisa Groom champion from that sort of internal perspective, the processes with the RAP, registering with Reconciliation Australia and so forth. And you can see the other attendees there from the top down, from CO and chair level down. So that's an quick overview of the RAP. Now the master planning process, you may have seen this very original 2008 master plan. And what you can see on the right-hand side is in red overlaid the bushfire impacts, the buildings that were destroyed by the 2019 bushfires. So springboarding from all of that, we'd like to now share with you some of the early master planning, some of the early phase concepts for some of the different precincts, and discuss how they do align still with that 2008 master plan. So I'm going to sort of back and forth here with Jonathan and Tim, whoever would like to step in. But with this one, for example, the tea house, you can see a green dot for where it is. You all know where the tea house is. And you can see I've circled around where it speaks of this already in the 2008 master plan as well. So Jonathan, did you want to discuss?
Yeah, I'll just hand over and then hand the baton quickly across to Tim, because we work very closely together on this. So rather than both of us try to say the same thing, Tim, are you happy to just go through the drawings that we've worked on and why, and explain it? I will, of course, jump in as I do, but Tim, over to you.
I think you're right. It's a fantastic team effort, and that's part of what makes Binna Burra work so well. I guess post-fire, for the board, it became clear that having lost the main lodge, we were looking for somewhere else that would be the home and the heart of Binna Burra. And so there's been a focus on the tea house as obviously the new reception and retail area. And as per these designs here, we're also looking at, when we get the funding, be able to build a deck on the north side. And you may not see it, but more ablution, toilets and showers, and maybe a bit of a common space underneath. But I think it was when Jonathan joined us that it became clear that a fresh set of eyes said it isn't only the tea house, it's actually the groom's cottage is the heart and the heritage. And so Jonathan's been overseeing that repurposing of that to the Bushwalkers Bar, the library upstairs, and I think that has really driven the focus of Binna Burra, what it has been, what we can be in the future. Certainly the tea house, as you'll see in the next slide there, Tristan, with the for those who haven't been up yet, the front now is all stone, very similar stone, or the same stone as actually is on the Sky Lodges. As I think most of you are aware, Dulux offered to repaint, and so they came up and repainted the inside and the outside of the tea house, the amenities block, etc., which was a fantastic donation. But we now have a separate new reception area there, the retail, and once the tea house is fully open, be able to move on with the full servery of meals and things. I don't know if you want to add any more of that on the tea house, Jonathan?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Tim.
And then following on with the master plan, Jonathan, Jono and I and others have come up with that middle section in the saddle where the barn and the pot shed and what remain in cabin 43, how that might look and feel in the future. At the moment, obviously, the barn is being used as the Bushfire gallery. It may get repurposed as we move along, but these sketches and images, and probably the next one as well there, Tristan, sort of a bit of a floor plan of showing a larger building to the left of the barn there, a new maintenance shed across the road from the pottery shed. Underneath that main building to the left of the barn is another ablutions block, because that, with TMR's support, we've been able to fill in, create a lot more level land below on the north side of the barn there. TMR have also supported with 4 car parks out there, one of which is disabled, and just tidying that area up a little bit. These plans were put together in time to put an application in with GTIF, a growing tourism funding, which we applied for. We've been unsuccessful in that one, but are still pushing in other areas to look at that funding, because obviously a maintenance shed, the maintenance and housekeeping is pretty important. And I think Jonathan also has plans for the shed also being storage of events, so that whilst we await to be able to do something on the top of the hill, it may be marquees, but it may be able to events on top of the hill. Any other comments on that area, Jonathan?
I think just so people are very clear, so the 2 buildings there, middle right-hand side, are the existing barn and the pot shed. Tim's talking about the building, the new larger building to the left, which is campsite, amenities, day visitor toilets, and so on, which we need every weekend. It will enable us to introduce more camping, which seems to be almost unprecedented demand, and very much in the spirit of Binna Burra. The conference centre doubles up as group accommodation. It's designed to be 2 rooms end to end, which can become male and female dormitories. And I'm very conscious of the fact that we have at the moment taken over the bunkhouse for storage to back up the groom's cottage and give a bit of storage for the public area cleaning team and campsite team. And that has perhaps worried a few people that we've moved away from the idea of group accommodation for university groups, walkers groups, LNHA, Friends of Binna Burra, or whatever. That's not our intention. Our intention is to create these improved facilities here where we can cater for that important part of people's sort of journey as they enjoy Binna Burra from cradle to the grave, frankly. The maintenance barn on the other side, it looks a bit stark there, but it is quite well hidden behind existing vegetation. So again, I just want to reassure people that we thought very carefully about the look and feel of these things, that they should complement the existing barn structure. So yes, I think probably the bottom right-hand sketch that we're seeing now on the screen, you can see in the middle of that bottom left-hand side, the barn and the pot shed there. It doesn't really show the vegetation around it very well, but it is there. So those buildings, if there was nothing there vegetated-wise, might look quite stark, but they're actually set in amongst some existing vegetation, and hopefully when you drive up there, you will see or feel comfortable that they are looking and feeling like the original barn pot shed that is still there at the moment. So I just want to sort of reassure a few people about the look and feel of that, so that we thought very carefully about how they sit within the landscape and how they can be flexible to respect a number of different uses which meet the current demand and some of the demand that's been dislodged by taking over Groom's Cottage. So that's more than enough on. Let's get on to some other really exciting stuff, which is a world first today, Tim. So back over to you on the lodge.
Thank you. So yes, as we know, we've lost the lodge, 42 cabins, effectively up on the top of the hill. We've had feedback, as you know, from the AGM and some meetings up at the old school site earlier in the year, and various other meetings we've had with the Reconstruction Council, taken on board as much of the input and the feedback. People have, emailed in designs, thoughts, ideas. We've then passed all of those on to the architect, John O'Medhurst, the same one who did the Sky Lodges, to come up with a concept as a starting place of what Binna Burra, a new lodge, a new accommodation might look and feel like. I guess as a precursor, there was a question of, should we actually rebuild anything up there? And if so, should we going to rebuild something, is that the right place to rebuild? And all the feedback to date has been people expect something like a lodge back up on the hill with some accommodation beside it. As we move along and start sharing ideas with Tristan and the master plan, we'll keep getting those ideas. But effectively, this is the current version of what we're looking at. Whilst it looks large, possibly in that bottom image, it has been designed to be the same size and the same scale as what we had before. Because effectively, that task force, one of the outcomes again was an approval of like-for-like building approval or development approval for the same GFA, the gross floor area that we had before. So the current thought is that the lodge would be roughly the same size, but a different layout to what we had before. And there's a design of 42 cabins that, cabins isn't maybe not the right word here, but a version of the cabins in roughly the same location, but instead of being two terraces there, as you'll see there, they're sort of stacked on top of each other. But one of the big changes is that from where the lodge site is, we'd actually run a big grassed area out to the east from the lodge over the top of the cabins, which means the top of the hill just gives us much better views and much better outlooks than what we've had in the past. It may be closer to what it was back in 1933, when it was mostly cleared up on the hill and there was better views. But a lot of those trees have grown up over time. One of the things out of the fires was they destroyed a lot of those trees and we had to clear a lot of them, which really have opened up views to the east again. Perhaps we can just go to the next view there, Tristan, because I'll go back one, sorry. Go back one, yeah. So the idea is that as you come up the driveway, there is still that big entrance with a big stone section behind it. There would be car parking off to the right, services access off to the left, but a big stairwell that goes up to a big open foyer or big open area that goes up 3 levels. You'd go up to the first level, which effectively is the same as the ground level of the grassed area just above Coomera Terrace. And that area would be sort of the events, meeting. There's a bar on the cliffside area again, but it also opens out onto the grass on the right. Otherwise, you continue up the stairs to the restaurant up the top. Maybe the next slide again. Thanks, Tristan. Which would be a full wrap-around, almost 360-degree view from the restaurant with a big fireplace in the middle of it, or fireplace upstairs and downstairs, and also focusing outside out towards Coomera Terrace. As you can see, there's been a planned swimming pool on the northern side, both as a pool and as water storage for future fires. So there's a lot of detail has gone into this, but part of the driver that's pushed us to pull all those ideas together is, one, to have something to start getting feedback on, but also, Jonathan and Steve might want to talk more about this, as an application we've put into the federal government as Binna Burra as a place of national significance. Effectively, we're looking at this being about $20 million to rebuild. About half is the lodge, about half is the accommodation. But obviously they all tie together to give us a version, more modern version, but still stone, tin and timber. As the Sky Lodges are proven for us, we can build in this environment and virtually be fireproof with the right design, the right materials, the right clearing, the right sprinkler systems. So it is possible to do that. And obviously that's what we'd want to create out of this. But that's the first version of what we're looking at doing. So interested in any feedback on that, obviously. Probably if we go to the next slide, I'd hand over totally to Jonathan with some thoughts and plans what we might do in the interim before we get to getting any funding to build up there.
Thank you, Tim. I'll just touch on again the motivation for this. First of all, we're very respectful of the 2008 master plan. In the earlier drawings that you showed, what we want to do to the tea house, that was always envisaged in 2008. The expansion of the barn precinct was envisaged in 2008, although it was marked as the wellness centre. It can still be that, but it can be flexible. The preliminary drawings for the lodge were motivated by a 3-week window of opportunity when the federal government announced the opportunity to apply through our Scenic Rim Council for what was two pools of money. One publicly announced, which was local economic recovery projects to do with the September 19 bushfires, but also a somewhat special pool of money for national iconic projects, which is where, with the help of Scenic Rim Council, we have pitched the designs that Tim has just shown with you. So we had 3 weeks to put together something based on the feedback from shareholders and stakeholders, which looks like a large lodge standing on its own, with the units of accommodation effectively hidden from immediate view, tumbling down the slope. You won't be able to see them nearly as much as obviously the Sky Lodges now, but you will, if you're in those rooms, you'll have the same spectacular, or even better spectacular views across out to Shipstone. And one of the things, it's a detail, but one of the important things is that we're talking about doing is getting rid of the power lines that at the moment kind of go across the site down towards the Sky Lodges. In the meantime, because all of that we've been talking about is dependent on funding, in the meantime, we have the upper and lower cabin sites, and we've been playing around with the idea of putting in up to 10, we think, of these tiny homes. Somebody's just jumped in. We haven't got any further than talking with, we've looked at a number of companies across Australia. There is a company that is based here on the Gold Coast, where these are examples of the kind of things that they have done, that we can work on a business case now for maybe 10 of these to be designed to suit the site. That may be on the upper and lower cabin site for maybe 2, maybe 3 years whilst we go through the funding process. If we're successful, then these cabins can then be moved down on the track down to Bellbird Clearing. They would provide self-contained accommodation that can be moved, but will give us a much needed extra space accommodation during this interim period before we can get up and running with the new major building. So this is a concept that I'm just introducing to you as an interim measure that we will be doing the business case on and bringing back more detail to shareholders in November, I hope. Probably not quite yet. Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan and Tim, for that. That's the end of my presentation. So I can either stop sharing screen or people can ask me to go back to any of those slides. But I'll just hand over to Steve to either open Q&A or do what you like.
Thanks. Thanks. Let's stop. Let's go back to mine. And folks, I'm mindful of time, but for those who would like to have a discussion and in the Q&A, we can extend past the 9. So let's just, Leighton, can we just have a look at any questions that are on the screen, on the chat room first, and then open it up for...
Yep, so basically everyone has the permission to unmute themselves. So perhaps if everyone wants to type their questions into the chat box, Steve, you can go through and address them. And if they want to sort of have a bit of a back and forth, they can unmute themselves and speak. Okay. So far, Heather's asked if we can see a copy of Tristan's document to review and provide feedback.
Yeah, we'll make that available. It's a very large file, so we've got to work out the technology of how we go through the communication sharing process. But the short answer is yes, Heather, to shareholders. Let's get the technology organised.
Cool. Then we've had a question from Helen Moore. Will the proposed lodge cater for the various standards of accommodation and price points as the old one?
Let me comment on that, and then I'll get Jonathan or Tim also. Yeah, look, we got a fairly strong message from the shareholders at the AGM last year in one of the workshops that now we've got a price point with the Sky Lodges at one end, and then at the other end we've got camping facilities, bring your own tent, safari tents, etc. Before the fire, we had 28 different price points for accommodation at Binna Burra, and now, of course, it's greatly reduced. So there's a big chunk of accommodation pricing in the middle that needs to be reflected in a range in the design of new rooms. So that's, Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that, or Tim?
Yes and no. You can't be all things to all people in the lodge. I think we have the site as a whole to be all things to all people. We've definitely got the basic camping through to the safari tents that is working well together up around the tea house at the moment. I think the group accommodation will work very well down around the barn. When we had 40 Brunei high school kids, it was lovely to see that happening, but they were pretty boisterous and as they should be, having fun. I'm not sure whether that mixes well with families with small kids trying to get to sleep at 8 o'clock at night. So I think the idea of having the group accommodation in the centre there works quite well. The lodge and the Sky Lodges is unashamedly Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah, I dropped out for whatever reason. Maybe it was that when I started saying the lodge and itself and the accommodation there, it will be a high class, that sounds terrible. It'll be a high quality experience. So in answer to the question, there will be different levels of accommodation to suit different pockets and different experience across the site. But the lodge and the accommodation there will be high quality, and I think that's probably as honest an answer I can give you.
Thanks, Jonathan. You get a room mixed with good quality rooms also. Tim, any comments?
Yeah, just to support and agree with Jonathan, I think we've got quite a range of accommodation, or will have when the lodge is there, and I think the addition of the pods that Jonathan's mentioned will give us another layer again that we haven't had in the past and provide that variety.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tim. Any other questions on the chat there, Leighton? I can't see.
We had one come through from Robin, but I think Tristan's just replied in chat, so that's cool. Ian Herbert said or asked, the new cabins appear as though they might have to be dependent on air conditioning. Is there any natural airflow? Question.
Tim?
Yep, short answer is the same as the Sky Lodges. Don't have any or don't need any air conditioning. There's no plan to put air conditioning in the new ones. So there's a lot of detail on the design. There's a lot of open area space and light behind them. So there is flow-through ventilation. I expect that similar to the Sky Lodges, the issue is actually just heating, but the insulation of these ones would be planned to be core-filled concrete again, and then tucked into the hill. That's actually what gives a lot of the heating and the cooling. That means there's no need for air conditioning.
Thanks, Tim. Any further questions? You can. We're unmuted, aren't we?
Steve.
Yeah, who's that talking?
Don.
Hi, Don.
Having just come back from Harvey Bay and Kingfisher, the biggest problem we've had is access for we oldies over 65. There are many, many steps, and I'd have to ask everyone to consider ramps all the time, and even things like diagonal lifts, which we had on the Kingfisher Bay barge. Very convenient to get up instead of a flight of stairs.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Don. Jonathan or Tim, you want to comment on that access issue?
Sure.
Yeah,
that was a big. Sorry, you go, Jonathan.
All the designs will be include wheelchair accessibility, and for those people that are not necessarily in wheelchairs will be accessible. So the safari tents, we now have a couple of safari tents which are nearly wheelchair accessible. We've still got a little bit of work to be done on that, and when we put in extra amenities, there will be some wheelchair accessible toilets for the campers as well. And certainly in the designs for the barn precinct and the lodges, in the lodge itself, we didn't show all the details of the floor plans, but there are both a public lift and also a service lift that will go up all levels.
And Don, if I can just add to that, as well as the lift inside the main lodge, where people would come in and drive in underneath, there's actually 20 car parks underneath with direct level access to the first level of all the cabins. So yeah, we've very much taken that into account, being aware of the last 86 years that hasn't been part of Binna Burra designs.
So folks, we'll be communicating and sharing the preliminary ideas and the master planning processes that Tristan alerted to today to all shareholders well before the AGM, so people can have a chance to absorb it all. It's a good starting point. Of course, the building plans, we need about $20 odd million, which we don't have at the present time. But before we get the money and find how we're going to get the money, we obviously have to have a plan and give people the opportunity to comment on that plan. And that's the stages that we're at now.
What have we got? Rod has asked, can we get more detail on funding options being considered?
Let me just go quick. Jonathan?
Yeah, so where we're at the moment is to say that the plans that you've seen so far, the tea house and the barn was driven by the Growing Tourism Infrastructure grant application, where we went from, there were 250 applications for 25 million across Queensland. We got invited to do a detailed business case. There were only 50 people invited to do that. And we got to the meritorious list, which means if they could find more money, then we're at the top of the list of projects which they know will create more jobs and improve the infrastructure for the public that use this site. So we are lobbying hard in this last few days of the state government for them to find that extra bit of money. They seem to be cash splashing on other things, so we're very keen to see if those projects on the meritorious list, including our own, get a chance to get some funding. The funding for the lodge, we have, as I said earlier, we have applied under the 2019 Bushfire federal funding for funding there. That is now subject to being considered at federal level and being administered by the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. So we haven't had a decision there. So I am hoping that somebody at a high level will see the opportunity to come back and make a timely decision at or before the shareholders meeting. We have been discussing over the last year whether or not our current structure, for example, as a shareholder company might be work in our favor or against us. There has been some concern in the past that we have perhaps not been eligible for some funding because we are a private company. We have set up our Binna Burra Foundation effectively as a shell at the moment, but it sits there ready for activation should we get offered some public funding that is conditional on us being a not-for-profit. That hasn't happened yet, but it's there ready should that be a condition. Clearly, if in the current round of grants that are out there at the moment, we are not successful, then we now have quite a substantial body of work to go back to the shareholders themselves, and that is then something for the board and the chair to consider how and we might approach the shareholders to invest further in this company should the structure of the company stay very much as it is. Finally, the other part of it is just to run the company on stronger, more sustainable financial basis so that we can go out to other investors and the banks to loan us the money simply on our confidence that with the right infrastructure we can be confident in generating enough money to repay lending from banks and other investors. So there's a number of things going on at the moment. We didn't want to miss out on the opportunity for what we feel is a strong case to the federal government that we are a national icon that can show that we have economic benefit beyond just Binna Burra, and therefore it was worth helping rebuild what we lost in the fire. So if that is successful, fantastic. If it's not successful, then we will be looking at all those other measures that I have just outlined to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Leighton, any other more questions in the chat box?
Yep, so we've got one from Corrine. She said, I think both master plan, vision and proposed projects look really good. Well done. Just one question for the new buildings below the lodge. Could it be possible to add more windows or sky windows?
Tim or Jonathan?
Yeah, look, one thing I was just about to type about the plans and just emphasize what's up, but they are preliminary plans to meet the funding windows at the moment. They're not final plans. In terms of windows and views and so on, yeah, I'll leave that for the clever architects. Certainly one of the things I wanted to emphasize, one of the ideas I've been having is to make sure that at night, when you're up in that restaurant, you're able to turn the lights out and enjoy the night sky, which is so special up here. As to more windows and ventilation, that's up to the clever designers to come up with a solution. We want to make sure that the experience from afar is that you don't actually see much of the accommodation. It should be hidden in the hillside, whereas the focus is very much on when you're in the accommodation looking out. You should have the same spectacular views that you get from the sky lodges from a different perspective.
Thank you. Tim, anything else to add to that?
And then we.
Oh, sorry.
No, that covers it. Thanks.
That's good. Sorry, Jonathan, back to you.
Just a question from Heather. She said, is there an opportunity to open up the design to other architects to submit designs?
I'll jump in again. Sorry, Chair, did you want to say something?
No, you go. After you, Jonathan.
There's always opportunity. At the moment, though, we have got a good design that is consistent with the look and feel, if you like it or not, of the sky lodges. I'm comfortable with that. But there is still a lot of opportunity under the 2008 master plan to look at the proposals for the environmental science village as it's put on the 2008 plan in and around the Bellbird clearing. So there are still lots of opportunities to look at this. We're not locked in, and the sharing of this plan today is an opportunity for those for once it goes public for other architects to obviously to make constructive comments. So I think it's that fine balance between building on what has been successful already, but also being open to fresh ideas at the same time.
Thanks, Jonathan. Leighton, any other questions on the chat?
One of the last sort of ones I can see was Corrine saying Griffith architecture students could definitely be involved to propose other design if needs be, but I guess it would be a question of timeline. When will you apply for the DA?
Yeah. Look,
I'll just add on that, we don't need to apply for a DA. We have a like-for-like application or permission already. We just need building certification. I think that's correct, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, building approval is the final one when we come to actually build. So from a funder's point of view, we're effectively shovel ready with designs. And it's just the building approval, which is the last technical part. But you wouldn't normally do that till the end anyway.
thanks for both. Leighton, any other questions in the chat box?
Just having a look. Lucy has just asked, when does the plan go public?
Effectively, it is now.
Yeah, it's public today. We'll package up a communication piece over the next couple of weeks and get it out to all our shareholders in a communication to all shareholders and links. We have to.
Everything else.
Sorry, we have to just balance that because a number of our shareholders don't use internet, so we've got to also prepare mail, hard copy and print and get mailing done as well as the electronic version done. So it just takes a couple of weeks to do that.
Yeah, no other questions by the look of it. Everything else is just thank and emphasis on further comments.
Yep.
So Leighton, it's Heather. There's just been a couple of questions on the chat that you've missed talking about international architect competitions, and I think Corinne's also put a comment on there. So there was one from Anne Herbert.
Jonathan?
We kind of answered that already, is that what you've seen so far is driven by feedback from the stakeholders and the shareholders in November, and I think it was March this year, which showed an expectation to rebuild the lodge. We have used Medhurst architects who did the Sky Lodges. They know the site well to get something in a timely way. There's nothing decided yet, so there is the opportunity now, once this is public, for critique, constructive critique. If we don't get any funding, then we have a lot more time, and we'll see what comes out of that. But I've taken the view, guided by the shareholders and the stakeholders, that got a pretty good idea about what they want, and we've tried in these designs, preliminary designs, to replicate the image of the mountain lodge and the spaces that we need. So I'm not sure how. It'll be interesting to see how other architects comment on it with their own interests, of course. But I think the great opportunity is to look at the relatively untouched land going down to Bellbird Clearing, where it was envisaged in 2008 that there would be a more environmental science village kind of study area down there. I think that is the area that is relatively untouched, and maybe it should stay untouched. Maybe we should do little or nothing down there. The intense accommodation area has always been up on the top. So I don't think anybody here is against international design competitions and so on and so forth, but they are typically long-term processes. There is normally some expense involved, and I need to make sure that we don't overpromise and underdeliver.
So it's an item that's not off the table, but to be on the table, it's timely and expensive, and we'll have to go into the planning and the resourcing questions that we have to face going forward. Look, folks, if there's no further questions, given our timing on this, of course, you can always send an email or get on the phone, have a chat about anything to do with Binna Burra. But I might roll on to the next slide. which is just a reminder of the wonderful book that Don Marshall put together and donated to Binna Burra. It's important. It's a great record, and it's important we sell lots of these to help fund our work at the Bushfire Gallery and support the library and the archives also. So if you haven't got a copy, it's really good. You can book it online. And then last message from me is that if anybody's in the local area and has got some time up their sleeve and can help volunteer at the Bushfire Gallery, that's always appreciated. 7 days a week, we do it between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. and it's being received quite well by visitors to the lodge. The reminder for the shareholders, annual general meeting will be on Sunday, the 22nd of November, starting at 10 a.m. We'll try and have it at Binna Burra if there's issues with marquees and things on top of Mount Roberts. But that's our preferred location. But if it's not possible and feasible and it costs too much, we might find another location in Beachmont. The hall that we had it in last year is already booked at Mackenzie's Farm. Gracely Park's an option. There's a couple other options too, but we'll alert our shareholders to that when we get the location finalised. Folks, I'm going to finish up the meeting there today. Thank you very much for your interest in Binna Burra. And from a shareholder's point of view, the next formal communication will be in writing or emails for those who have given us email approval. And that will be information leading up to the AGM. So thank you all, and we'll finish off for today on this broadcast.